Okay. Um, you know, as they do these manipulations, right? They make you experience weird, disturbing, and pedophilia centric reactions and feeling and thoughts and imaginations. With me, it's been the same thing of trying to say that what you experience, it's something you've experienced when you're younger, when you're a kid, and try to be like, you see, you remember feeling something like that then? Remember what you did when you're in eighth grade, right? And then try to create like patterns of like ways of thinking and things that are just obviously and not even obviously doesn't make sense. I'm in my 30s and they're like, no, we just like we match it to you as a child, right? Because it's true that a child brain is like an adult's brain, right? These people are delusional, right? And then they immediately try to say, oh, you changed, huh? You're no longer a child, right? And it's just, even that is illogical, but you understand they're meant to break you down. Yeah, with me, there's a lot of childlike individual, and I think it's just also to kind of show, like, do you not think that child like that person talking to you would think actually like that, right? I think some of that is there. That you see that person, you see that the person talking to you. Do you think she has a logic, like real logic? Like they look like kids, they will have this childlike logic, but they obviously know that their job is to manipulate people in these ways, and they start saying, "Oh, we proved it. We proved the people gonna hurt you are gonna prove it." Like as if I don't know that this is a government-led program, right? As in, I don't know is this huge government entity with extreme resources and sophistication, and I'm just a subject in this experimentation. Of course, I know. So those entities can do anything, anytime. I mean, we're talking about technology that can rewire your brain. You tell me this person, you got a person to do this thing to me, torture me? What? This technology can fry my brain, can fry my bones, my teeth, like can do so much things in a surgical way. And you tell me, wow, you have somebody who do this because like just like they want you to think in these illogical ways, because what they're trying to do is to get you to accept these things. And so it's like, no, we proved. And like, first of all, there's no need to be proving. I know what you guys are. You are creating technology that can make me go blind in 2 seconds and make me see again, and then make me not smell full, and then like, so there's no going to be any proving needed. If you want somebody to do something to me, you'll do that, because you are not just a bunch of like feminist progressive group that are investigating this. No, you guys are perps contracted by this government entity that is experimenting on human subjects using this technology, and I'm one of many subjects. What you're doing right now is called a script. It's a repetitive things that you say over and over to disorient somebody. You understand? So they try to do these things that, no, we proved it. They're gonna strip you. They're gonna stab. Like they're gonna use a bayonet to do these horrible things to you. It's like, whatever's gonna happen. I'm thankful that I don't have to live life the way you live. I know it's gonna be horrible. Of course, I don't want to have that to happen. But imagine me living your life. Just imagine the illogicalness and the humiliation I have to be involved in. You're gonna listen to what they do to children. You're gonna listen to the horrible things they've done to women and children. Let's focus. You're gonna listen to what they do to children. The testimony of women is just like, it's just so much of it. It's ridiculous. But let's just talk about kids. What they do to kids. This is this trash. Forget about the psychological warfare of forcing people to think in these disturbing ways, to break them down. These people also have issues with pedophilia. These agencies, these big government entities, are intelligence community related. So not only you have the humiliation of being the program that torture children, the entities that are really running the show are filled with pedophiles. There's been an issue there. That's why this BuzzFeed article, and I know they just crashed the surface. They just like really just touched on there's very like, there's much more going on than what this BuzzFeed article is talking about, for sure. For them to have that much, that means that there's so much more not seen. So there's obviously a pedophilia issue in these entities that is running the show now. This fraudulent psyop they try to present, this psyop they try to present themselves as. Not only this validation that they do this pedophilia type of torture. I mean, it's, when somebody was surveying, try to put like a guideline of what they do as target individual, what you experience, the guidelines. The pedophilia torture is like number 6 there, after asking 1,000 people who are target individual. So then then on top of that, you have the humiliation to be in a program that tortured children in sexual matters. And we're not talking about decades ago. We're talking about somebody talking about it in 2018. They're doing everything possible to try to make themselves like be something else. The psyop is what they try to create. It's a psyop. It's a way for you to try to accept everything by reality. That these people are contracted by these government entities to implement these systematic tactics to break people down. Now you see this picture. For me, when they do this pedophilia type of torture, then they try to get you to be like, no, listen, what we do, right? We just rewire you to think the way you would think when you were that young. We matched it to you when you were like that young. Matter of fact, right now, what they've done, right? They went back to about 8 months before this picture was taken. It was Christmas of 2000. Freshly turned 12, maybe a two month ago. And I remember a Christmas party, and there was like what's the name? It was like our uncle's Christmas party, and I was like 12. I remember, and I remember this little girl who was like my cousin's daughter. She was like younger. She's like 3 or 4 or something like that. She's like, oh, can you look after my daughter? I was like, okay. Very adorable little girl. Mind you, I'm like 12. It's like, okay. They try to give me stimulations and sensations and whatever, which is not true. But mind you, I'm just turning 12 years old. That same Christmas party, I remember crying because my uncle grabbed my hands a little too hard because I sat on his chair, on his spot, on his seat. He grabbed my hand a little too hard. And like I was like, Dad, he grabbed my hand and I started crying. I remember that I made a scene as a kid, crying and everything. We're talking about that kind of childhood. So they try to add this sensation, stimulation. There, you felt something. I was like, stop it, no. And you don't try to go manipulate a child's brain who's just 12 years. This picture that you see is me older, like 6-7 months older. Can you imagine, like, okay, yeah, your brain there, you say, it's like, no, that's trash. That's what you guys do. And then I try to go back because when I was maybe 6-7 months older than that picture, I did something stupid. That was a time in my life when I discovered myself in a sexual way, right? We know as kids what we do when we find out certain things, and I was doing that all the time as a kid who just found out about it all the time. Like it was just like non-stop. To most men at this point know what I'm talking about, because we kids learn something and then we do that a lot, non-stop. And I do something stupid, and that's really embarrassing to myself, but it's embarrassing because somebody, like, it's just something embarrassing. And they bring back, okay, remember that? I was like, no, listen, I know that moment is embarrassing. That is the only moment I can look back as like, this is an embarrassing moment. But them, they're like, oh, but remember 6-7 months you felt this way when you were like just 12 years old. So when you just turned 14, you remember what you did. It's like, oh, you just trying to put things together. No, when I was 14, I did this embarrassing thing to myself. And yes, something else was like, I did something to myself, but there was a child there too. And so they try to be like, that's proof. It's like, no, a kid who just turned 14 years old can do certain things like that to himself. It's embarrassing. I'm looking at me as in my mid-30s. And they try to get you to subscribe. It's like, you see, with the pattern, when you were like just turned 12, remember seeing this thing like that? It's like, no, I didn't care. It's like, oh, it's okay, whatever. When at that time in my age, I was 14, just learning how to do things to myself. And so you can understand, at that age, kids can do a lot of things. So they try to create patterns and connect things. Like, now, it's just pathetic. Because now, as in my 30s, it's like, we just matched it. It's not fair. It's like, yes, it's fair. You think I don't see things for what they are? These people not only do horrible things to children, but they do pedophilia type of torture. I put things in perspective. They are trying to make people accept these things. They are trying to make adult men and women to think that what they're experiencing today is some kind of natural response, is real. No. They're like, no, what we do, we just resurfaced what you could think when you were a kid. In your 30s. It's like me talking to somebody who's about to be 40. It's like, remember when you were a kid? Yeah, remember when you just turned 12 years old, it will make you think like that. Of course I know it's not true. Of course I know what they're doing. They're forcing me to experience disturbing reaction toward children. And then they try to make me believe that when I was a child myself, this is how I will react. There's people who do the pedophilia type of torture. I'm never going to let them live their fantasy. Listen to the horrible things they have done to children. Listen to the pedophilia things. And you understand. Something systematic.
Children. I had a 7-year-old client who has autism. She was the most significantly affected of all of my clients. I eventually had to tell this client to go to another clinic. And they used her to threaten the most torture in me, as well as their most extreme forms of torture. For several months, she would cry and scream horribly during our therapy sessions, despite having a great day at school. This was highly unusual behavior for her, as she usually behaved very well during her therapy sessions and had been making incredible progress on all of her therapy goals. This was used to threaten extreme torture on me, making me scream and cry, etc. They would make the kids act out the kinds of torture that would later be done on me. For example, they would also sometimes make her bite her hand, threatening to make me bite my hands, as they often do. One day, she had a large, severe bite mark on her arm. She has also grabbed her crotch, saying, "Ow," and this was used to threaten me with severe sexual torture. One day, I also observed her gasping for air a few times in the same way that I do when I am being more severely suffocated. The suffocation had been in a mild state for a while up until this point. Many of their torture methods are cyclical in severity. Right after I saw this child being suffocated, then I began to experience very extreme suffocation all day, every day, for about 2 months straight, and that's also when they made it worse when I eat. Then I also worked with a 4-year-old little girl with Down syndrome, as well as her 5-year-old sister, who also has Down syndrome. I observed both of these girls suddenly grabbing their genitals in pain and verbalizing, "Ow." I observed this at least on 1 or 2 occasions for each of them during their I also have had a couple of kids that experienced zaps of pain to their hands as they covered the sore spot with their other hand, saying, "Ouch," while the V2K in my head crotch and leaned forward in his chair. Then he made a frightening grimace of severe pain. I asked him what was wrong and if he needed to use the restroom, but he said no to having to use the restroom and was not able to verbalize anything more due to his language delay. He looked puzzled and bewildered. Even though I had stated that it was time to do more work right before this incident, I quickly just let him play another game, and he quickly returned to his joyful, happy self again. In other sessions, he has also grabbed his crotch and said, "Ow," while looking up at me. A while back, I had a 4-year-old client at my office who complained of disturbing sounds in his ears when none were around. It only happened as soon as he entered my office. Once he complained of a roaring, drilling construction sound in his ears that I then later heard myself when I got home as a form of V2K, and the V2K said, "That's what he heard," and put the child's image in my mind along with the memory of the incident. Most of the kids I work with are accompanied by their parents to their therapy sessions, which is something I encourage so that I can provide parent education on therapy techniques that they can implement at home to continue supporting and helping the child make more progress. Now I would like to talk.
I've had a decent education. I live in El Dorado Hills, California, with my wife of 14 years, Lorna, and our 5 children. Nicole is 15, Patricia 14, Christopher 13, Dylan 9, and Avery 16 months old. Not only have I been going through this, but my entire family has suffered right by my side. We have all experienced the same type of harassment on different levels. We have all suffered the same symptoms while this harassment was going on. Some of our physical symptoms include severe tooth decay and vision loss, unexplained rashes and burns, severe headaches, mood swings, anxiety, thyroid problems, high blood pressure, heart problems, vision loss and cancer. Premature, which I attribute to this. Our son Dylan, now age 9, was born very premature. He was born at 31 weeks. During her pregnancy with Dylan, we were being targeted more so than other times. At the delivery there were weird men walking and waiting around the hospital. Right outside our delivery room window, there was a white cargo van parked with 2 suspicious men inside. They were there the entire labor, a delivery. Our son had to be transported to another hospital 45 minutes away. When arriving to the Toa hospital, those same men and van were present. Rashes that have not been explained by several doctors. These rashes have been present for several years at a time. If interested, I will gladly furnish you with detailed photos of the rashes. Our infant daughter, at 3 weeks old, was diagnosed with Lerner syndrome. This was after a severe rash appeared on her body after a few days of torture. We were told by a couple doctors to take her home and love her and spend the rest of the time we have with her. They told us she would ultimately die from this syndrome. Thank God that Lerner syndrome was not what affected our daughter. Doctors are still dumbfounded by her rash and symptoms. Sadly, we know that her symptoms were effects from the torture this poor innocent 3-week-old baby endured. Recently, I lost complete time. I exhibited the flashing lights. My 9-year-old son Dylan complained about the lights. You will often hear that vision is something that is greatly affected with this type of torture.
So diseases and effects. But the conversations, the scripts they're called, are always the same. And I've heard them all. They're slightly tailored for each individual, but they're scripts. And they're meant to confuse the very derogatory, typical breakdown. If you've ever been to boot camp, you're a worm until you're part of the team. And why would you want to break down the ego of that person? To rebuild it. So this gets into creating Manchurian candidates, split personality spies, and information couriers, people that will carry messages to other places without being aware that they're actually doing it. So you can imagine the misperception that is caused by this, and a lot of people, the targets when they're interviewed are tricked into believing evil aliens have abducted their brains, demons. They're tricked. Yes. Some of them are pretty crazy. They have names like Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz, or hypnosis, that people will believe something other than a massive government could do this. And I've heard all the stories. One guy believed it was some 14-year-old kid with an Xbox that lived next door. And so, anyway, my interview with Len, he very well described a typical breakdown script that's used on almost all the TI victims. TI stands for targeted individuals. Some of them are pretty crazy. They They have names like Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz, and those are the confusion tactics. And when they're breaking down the ego of the human through all the pains and tortures and the verbal breakdown, these are typical CIA torture scripts. I mean, Kubark manual. And they do good cop, bad cop interrogation called Jeff and Mutt, and they go right through the list, right? Just textbook. So whoever the handlers are on the other side of this synthetic telepathy, they're following the handbook perfectly, and they've been trained.
But why Len?
And everyone asks that.
Okay, yeah.
Can I talk? Here's how I do my studies, and I wanted to find the commonalities, but I have to throw away the ones I'm uncertain about that are true targets. You know, maybe there's natural schizophrenia, there's a whole bunch of chemical imbalances,
right,
etc.
Right.
These weapons can actually induce and mimic all those diseases and effects. But the conversations, the scripts, they're called, are always the same. And I've heard them all. They're slightly tailored for each individual, but they're scripts. And they're meant to confuse, the very derogatory. That's just typical breakdown.
Most common examples include homosexual targets that are forced with voices that are derogatory to their lifestyle and similar mental images. Almost all targets are forced to view child pornography in their minds.
Make it appear as though the thoughts in my head are actually mine, which I know they aren't most of the time, because these people are very perverse.
Dirty diaper or baby powder, which they sometimes combine with the pedophilia type of torture, including the
I make it so dramatic. It is dramatic. It's somebody trying to end my life. It's somebody trying to end who I am as a person. It's somebody trying to take over my mind, putting thoughts of pedophilia. This disgusting thing. You saw where I was going with that first word. Disgusting things that I don't even want to talk about because it makes me sick. I don't even like those words in my mind. But it is what it is. So I have no choice now but to acknowledge that there are people in my surroundings or whatever they're doing. I don't know how they do it. I don't care. I don't know if it's through.
began to experience what some call V2K, or voice to skull. This involves the projection of voices, noises, and music directly into my mind to communicate with me in real time and at the speed of thought. And it also includes the manipulation of thoughts, emotions, and perceptions in the person's mind. Additionally, the targeting is all highly perverted and sexual, as well as destructive and violent. Recently, they even started adding moaning and groaning sounds to the V2K and started putting actual creaking sounds directly in the walls to make it sound as though people are having sex. And I was able to audio record these rhythmic creaking sounds and have submitted this file to the commission. These voices are vulgar, violent, cruel, and constantly threatening and using profanities that I never use. They repeat certain phrases excessively, as I learned that repetition is a form of torture in and of itself.
Stop your own thoughts from happening and replace them with other thoughts by sending thoughts to your head. And it's so sophisticated that you cannot tell where these thoughts are coming from. There's no way to discern that they're coming from somewhere other than
the same thing. Also that some of the TI stated that they forced her through holograms to see aberrant sexual scenes. Then she felt that she was starting likening what she was forced to see every night. Then I thought how that could happen, but then I told them that they would never take my will, and since we all know how the psychopaths groups work with what the TI says or does, then they started during the nights to run some kind of beam where suddenly I've been wakened up at 3 o'clock in the mornings and some kind of voice comes and say phrases, sound incomprehensible, and some other times can actually catch what is saying, ITS not my voice, a different voice, and I realized that they are trying to program for me to take it in a way that I won't notice a possible change in my behavior. this is not new, because one main thing this program is out there is called behavior modification for the undesirable, and that's one of the excuses this groups give for the neighbor TO join, deception. I learned to talk back, in my mind, during the process when I was awakened, and I would say demeaning things, that I cannot repeat it in this blog, you know what I mean. Since they had violated me for so long, I decided to aggravate them with words, in my mind. I can hear my own voice. I told them I'm going to make you pay for all of the years of torture that I've taken, and all you are going to hear is aggravation. For every single second of my privacy that you have taken away. From me and my family. Then said this, the slaves began a program of perversion. First was with my dog. I am very playful with my pet, and suddenly one day that I was petting him I felt strange, in the sense of the word. I thought, this is strange, and then afterwards that strange sensation continued. Then in that moment I realized that was impost, so I thought, look at this losers, don't know how to put me down, and they are doing this. So I told them that I know what you are trying to do, and I started laughing. And then I said again out loud, you'll never take my will, ASS. So just to show them that I meant what I said, I kept playing with my dog, and even though that attacks continue, I don't let them get me. Today they continue with the programming of perversion, but this time they are aiming in the use of people, better said young people, also children and homosexuals. When I aggravated them I usually called demeaning names, and one of them is referring to homosexuals. For me all of the slaves are misfits, society haters, scumbags, etc. No, I don't have anything personal against and images and imagination. In addition to this kind of implanting information that they need, they manipulate the psyche so that the information is written into your memory. Then by stimulating the certain regions in the brain they can retrieve this information and present it as your own memory. This is the conclusion that can be made judging by the influence they have been making on me with their psychotronic weapons, for example artificial thoughts, imagination, and mental torture.
So, as you obviously hear this, these are the people who are matching, assessing, analyzing. Obviously, throughout this whole time, they were using different scriptive things. They say, "Oh, we're sorry," because they're sorry for what they're doing to me, and they're doing it for somebody else. They try to disorient me, but it's as you heard this man talk, Robin talk, and this is meant to kind of create a psyop and disorient reality. These people are the people who are involved in doing these things that you heard toward children. You heard the sexual torture of children, radiation of torture, radiation of children, infants, we were called, as you heard, suffocations, all these horrible things they do to kids. And they do this cowardly, as you know, this is done remotely. These bottom feeders, some of them sound like kids themselves, are involved in doing these things to children. These people have tendency of pedophilia. You heard that. You hear the obvious issues. You hear the obvious pedophilia type of tormenting. Systematic. Almost all target individuals are forced to have some experience that is pedophilia-centric in regard of imaginations or thoughts or stimulations, as you heard one of the women say that, aimed toward children. Now you understand the obvious patterns there. And so what they're trying to do is just try to talk about me as a kid and even try to create patterns, try to make something that's not there. For example, when I'm like just turning 12 at this party, it's like, oh, you see, and then give me the stimulation sensation of like what I'm experiencing today into my memory instead of me just a little kid seeing. And matter of fact, I was saying, I saw this my cousin's daughter who was like a little cute little girl, and me being a little boy too, and just like seeing her, this little cute kid, the cute little girl, just in a innocent way, but they try to turn into something else. Mind you, it's me when I'm 12 years old. And what I actually did to myself as an older kid, well, just 2 years later when I was, just found out about myself in regard of like what I can do to myself, and I know what you get, and I hope I'm clear about what I'm saying in that fashion, and doing some stupid thing to myself at that moment, which a kid at that age is can typically do. Then try to create some patterns, but you see, remember that moment, but he doesn't, no, you're trying to create false moments and false patterns versus real patterns here. That almost all target individuals are forced to experience this pedophilia type of torture. It's not me when I'm a kid. I'm a grown man. And when I was a kid, I wasn't even think like that. But how can you even try to make somebody be, no, we made you think the way you were used to think when you were a kid. We're not doing the pedophilia type of torture. And you hear this drilling noise there that's kind of doing at the same time while I'm talking to kind of disorient me. Because it's obvious. How can you tell a grown man, no, what we're doing to you is making you think the way you used to think as a child. Us who do all these things that obviously do the pedophilia type of torture, obviously torture children, obviously torture women, but for you, we just matched. Yeah? Are you not matching with the pedophilia type of torture that you do to others? To all my target individuals, they will truly make you dumb. And let me not end this. While they are, quote-unquote, verifying and assessing, look at what's going on in the entities that actually contract this trash to implement this nastiness, this torment, this experiment onto us.
This is one employee of the CIA had sexual contact with a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. He was simply fired. One employee purchased sexually explicit videos of young girls filmed by their mothers. He resigned. One employee estimated that he had viewed up to 1,400 sexually abusive images of children while on agency assignments. Not sure what actions, if any, were taken by him. One contractor arranged for sex with an undercover FBI agent. I think that you mentioned that. Posing as a child, he had his contract revoked. One CIA staffer was charged with child sexual crimes, and the employee was also under investigation for mishandling classified material. The CIA did not answer detailed questions, saying only that the agency takes all allegations of possible criminal misconduct committed by personnel seriously. So you're saying they're involving children, says BuzzFeed, including the viewing of images of abuse, have been uncovered at other agencies that handle sensitive information. In a November 2009 report, the Department of Defense acknowledged that dozens of Pentagon staff members or contractors had such images. In 2014, the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community found that 2 officials from the National Reconnaissance Office, which oversees America's spy satellites, acknowledged viewing images of child sexual abuse during polygraph examinations. This is so disturbing. At a symposium in 2016, Daniel Payne, a top Pentagon security official, said that when workers' computers were examined, the amount of child porn I see is just unbelievable. Is this something that is happening for whatever reason with more frequency in our intelligence agencies, or is this something that is more pervasive in the general population than I originally realized? I mean, what's going on here? This is bizarre. It's so evil.
Ali, we're told, and when I was put through recruitment into the intel community, you're put through polygraphs, you're put through a rigorous selection process. Why aren't these people weeded out? Why are so many pedophiles allowed to be given top-level security clearance? Remember, these aren't just people walking in off the street and saying, hey, can I get hired? Can I get a job? You're put through an extremely rigorous background check screening process. It's called an SSBI, single scope background investigation. There are people, they interview you, they interview your family, they interview your contacts, they go through your online footprint, they go through everything. So why is it that when they're going through these footprints, they're not checking, these digital footprints, they're not checking for so many pedophiles getting through their ranks? If it were up to me, you need to go into Congress, and Congress needs to launch a brand new church committee, number 1, to talk about domestic surveillance operations, but number 2, to ask the question, why are there so many pedophiles sitting behind those computer screens within the walls of Langley, within the Pentagon, and throughout the broader intelligence community?
You understand reality. Matter of fact, they were trying to counter that because when they were saying the CIA agent that had a sexual contact with a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old, they were trying to bring up, when I was making a video yesterday, I was talking about me in college with this college girl, and me being in college having sexual contact with her, and they're like, you see, contact, and to try to compare it and do something like that to counter reality. That's the kind of trickery they do to force you to block out the reality of things, because these people are contracted by pedophiles. Well, let me just repeat that. I should say that better. They're not contracted by pedophiles. The entities that contract this trash are filled with pedophiles. There's pedophilia issues in these entities. It's obvious. Who knows how serious this thing is? But if they already have that kind of information, you can only imagine the trends and the issues, the patterns of pedophilia that's ongoing there. While they're trying to make, we match it to you when what we did, we made you think like a kid. You understand? Reality is always going to show. As they try to come up with their fantasy, this is reality. You cannot escape from reality. And they were trying to say, we are daring, because they try to make themselves be like, where this, the psyop is with me is just where this group of feminist women who are progressive and we're just daring, we're radical, and we're just, we're just like femme fatale-ish. But listen to what an actual target individuals specifically calls out about the V2K and the people, the perps talking.
Sound like an angry ass old person. Then a couple of days later, a female said the same thing. Get shot in the face. Stupid shit like that. But what I really noticed is with the Voices Girl, it's a bunch of females. And I'm like, bro, really? You're not a woman. What real woman would stalk another female or sit back and allow this to go on? You really think?
They will try to counter this by saying, you remember, I remember being on a TI day, meeting for the first time and finding out that some of the people there were actually perps, or they were doing some perp-like activities. And they're like, you see now they're involving even them. They were like, listen, I know the trickeries, I know the manipulation, I know you can obviously infiltrate people, these organizations. It's easy. That's why they recommend for TI to not really stick around too much, because there's going to be a sense of paranoia, and there's going to be obviously people not going to be TI involved in this. So obviously, I know what these people do. I know reality. I will never let them live the fantasy. I know what I'm experiencing now is what they force me to experience, because they do this pedophilia type of torture. And I know myself. I've been me long enough to know who I am. And for them to try to say, what you're experiencing is what we make you feel when you're like, how we just bring back how you used to feel as a child. When you listen to all this obviousness and validation that not only they do this pedophilia type of torture, but they actually torture children. These people are trash and lowlifes that their sole job is to create a psyop to block out the reality that this is actually ran by this government entity filled with pedophiles. To all my target individuals, stay strong.